My name is Amanda Wilson and I am 34 years old. Our annual family camping trip to Blackwater Forest was supposed to be a chance to reconnect with my parents and my brother Brian's family. That morning I took my 10-year-old daughter Lily for a short nature walk to explore. When we returned, everything was gone. The people, the tents, the food, the cars. Just an empty campsite with a note on a small wooden table. "This is for the best. Trust me." My own family had left us to die in the wilderness. Before I tell you how we survived 10 days alone in the forest, drop a comment saying where you are watching from and subscribe to hear more incredible survival stories. Living in Portland as a single mother had never been easy, especially after my divorce 3 years ago. My ex-husband moved across the country for a job opportunity, leaving me to raise Lily alone with only sporadic child support payments that never seemed to arrive on time. I had always been the black sheep of my family, constantly living in the shadow of my brother Brian. Brian had the perfect life, at least on paper. A successful attorney with a beautiful house in the suburbs, married to Rachel, who somehow maintained her fitness influencer physique, despite having 2 children, Tyler and Megan, both straight-A students and sports stars at their private school. My parents, Margaret and Robert, had never tried to hide their preference for Brian and his accomplishments. Their refrigerator was plastered with photos of his family vacations and the grandchildren's trophies, while my occasional art show invitations were buried under grocery lists and appointment reminders. 2 years ago, I made the decision to leave my stable but soul-crushing corporate job to pursue a career in art therapy working with traumatized children. The pay cut was significant, but the fulfillment I found in helping children express their emotions through creativity was worth eating ramen noodles twice a week. My parents and Brian, however, saw it differently. "You are making another impulsive decision, Amanda," my mother had said during our weekly Sunday dinner, her lips pursed in that familiar way that always made me feel 6 years old again. "How will you provide stability for Lily when you can barely pay your rent?" Lily had always been sensitive, more attuned to emotions than other children her age. She inherited my artistic temperament and intuitive nature, which made her perceptive, but also vulnerable to criticism. We shared a special bond that sometimes excluded others, a private language of inside jokes, and knowing glances that seemed to particularly irritate Brian. "You are raising her to be just as flaky as you are," he had told me once, after Lily had a meltdown at a family gathering when the noise and chaos became too overwhelming for her. "That new age parenting style of yours is creating a child who will never function in the real world." I had almost canceled the annual camping trip this year after that particular incident, but Lily had been looking forward to seeing her cousins. Despite their parents, Tyler and Megan were good kids who treated Lily kindly, and I did not want to deprive her of family connections just because my relationship with my brother was strained. Blackwater Forest National Park was about 5 hours from the nearest town, a remote wilderness area with stunning natural beauty but extremely spotty cell service. My father had been coming here since he was a boy and insisted on continuing the tradition with his grandchildren. The isolation had never bothered me before. In fact, I had always appreciated the chance to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. The first 2 days of the camping trip were tense, but relatively normal. Brian made snide comments about my ancient Honda Civic struggling up the mountain roads. My mother questioned why Lily did not participate in any team sports like her cousins. My father spent most of his time teaching Tyler how to fish, barely acknowledging Lily's existence, except to tell her to be careful around the campfire as if she were a toddler instead of a responsible 10-year-old. But there were strange moments that should have raised my suspicions. Hushed conversations between my parents and Brian would abruptly stop when I approached. I caught Brian taking detailed photographs of all the hiking trails surrounding our campsite, studying the maps with unusual intensity. And my parents were being unusually attentive to Lily, asking her questions about school and friends in a way that seemed forced and uncomfortable. On the third morning, my mother approached me as I was making coffee over the campfire. "There is a beautiful waterfall about a mile north of here," she said, her voice casual but her eyes not quite meeting mine. "You and Lily should explore it this morning. The light is perfect for pictures this time of day." In retrospect, her suggestion should have triggered my warning bells. My mother had never encouraged my photography hobby before. But Lily had overheard and was already excited about the adventure, her eyes bright with anticipation as she grabbed her little collection bag for rocks and interesting leaves. "Can we go now, Mom?" she asked, already putting on her hiking boots. How could I have known that walking down that trail with my daughter would be the beginning of the most terrifying ordeal of our lives? The morning was crisp and beautiful, as Lily and I set out on the trail my mother had suggested. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of pine trees, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Lily skipped ahead of me, stopping occasionally to pick up interesting rocks for her growing collection. "Mom, look at this one. It has little sparkly bits in it," she exclaimed, holding up a piece of quartz with flecks of mica that caught the light. "Do you think it could have gold in it?" I smiled at her enthusiasm. "That is quartz with mica. It is beautiful, but not gold. Pop it in your bag and we can look it up in your geology book when we get back." Lily had been fascinated by rocks and minerals since she was 6 years old, declaring that she wanted to be a geologist when she grew up. Unlike my parents, who pushed Tyler and Megan toward more lucrative career paths, I encouraged Lily to follow her passions wherever they might lead her. As we continued along the trail, the sound of rushing water grew louder. The path narrowed and descended steeply, requiring us to hold onto tree roots for balance. After about 20 minutes, we emerged at a small clearing where a magnificent waterfall cascaded down a series of rocky ledges into a clear pool below. "Wow," Lily breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is like something from a fairy tale." We spent nearly 2 hours at the waterfall, taking photos, collecting interesting pebbles from the water's edge, and just sitting in peaceful contemplation of the natural beauty surrounding us. During that time, Lily and I had one of those special conversations that I knew would stay with me forever. "Mom, how do you know when to trust your feelings about things?" she asked, dangling her feet in the cool water. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Well, sometimes I get a funny feeling about things, or people, like a little voice inside telling me something is wrong, but I cannot explain why. Is that weird?" I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of pine needles in her hair. "That is not weird at all. That is your intuition, your inner wisdom. Always listen to that voice, Lily. It will rarely steer you wrong." The irony of that conversation would not be lost on me later. By early afternoon, we decided to head back to the campsite, eager to show everyone our discoveries. Lily had her bag full of special rocks, and I had captured some stunning photos of the waterfall on my camera. The walk back seemed quicker, our steps lighter, with anticipation of sharing our adventure. As we approached the clearing where our campsite was located, I noticed something odd. The usual sounds of my family moving about, cooking, talking were absent. An unnatural stillness hung in the air that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Where is everybody?" Lily asked, running ahead of me into the clearing. I emerged from the tree line and stopped dead in my tracks. The campsite was completely empty. The 3 cars, my Honda Civic, my parents' SUV, and Brian's luxury sedan, were gone. The 4 tents that had been set up in a neat semicircle were gone. The camping chairs, the portable stove, the coolers full of food, the water containers, all gone. "Dad, Mom," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Brian, Rachel." Lily turned to me, confusion clouding her face. Maybe they went for a drive, or to get more supplies. But I knew that was not it. They would never leave without telling us, without leaving someone behind with the campsite, and they would not have taken down the tents. A cold dread began to spread through my chest as I moved forward, scanning the empty clearing for any sign of what had happened. That is when I saw it. In the center of where our camp had been, a small wooden folding table remained. On top of it sat a single water bottle and a piece of paper held down by a rock. My hands trembled as I picked up the note and read the words written in my brother's neat handwriting. "Amanda, this is for the best. Trust me. You need to learn self-reliance. We will come back in 2 weeks. Brian." "Mom, what does it say?" Lily asked, her voice small and frightened as she watched my face drain of color. I could not bring myself to show her the note. How could I explain to my 10-year-old daughter that our family had deliberately abandoned us in the wilderness, that her uncle, grandparents, and aunt had packed up everything and driven away, leaving us with nothing but a single bottle of tea polandation, water, and a cryptic message. They had to leave for an emergency. I lied, my mind racing. They will be back soon. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but they took our tent, and all our food, and my backpack with my books. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I would find. No service. We were 5 hours from the nearest town in dense forest, with no cell reception. I remembered my father mentioning that the ranger station was closed this season due to budget cuts. There would be no regular patrols. For a brief, desperate moment, I considered the possibility that this was some kind of cruel joke, that Brian and my father were hiding in the woods waiting to jump out and laugh at how easily frightened we were. But as the sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty campsite, reality set in. This was no joke. They had left us to die. As darkness fell, I scrambled to create some kind of shelter from branches and leaves, trying to remember anything I had ever learned about wilderness survival. Lily had stopped asking questions, her silence more heartbreaking than her tears. We huddled together under our makeshift lean-to as the temperature dropped and a light rain began to fall. "Why would they do this, Mom?" she finally whispered, her small body shivering against mine. I had no answer that made sense. No explanation that would not terrify her more than she already was, so I held her tighter and promised her something I had no right to promise. "We are going to be okay. I will get us out of here." As the rain grew heavier and we lay on the cold, hard ground, I stared into the darkness, one thought repeating in my mind: how could my own family leave us here to die? The first rays of morning sun filtered through our makeshift shelter, waking me from a fitful sleep. My back ached from the hard ground and my clothes were damp from the rain that had seeped through our branch roof during the night. Lily was still asleep, her face peaceful in a way that made my heart clench. Soon that peace would be replaced by hunger, fear, and questions I could not answer. I carefully extricated myself from her side and stepped out to assess our situation in the harsh light of day. The reality was even worse than I had feared. We had almost nothing. My small day pack contained a single water bottle, now half empty, one granola bar, a Swiss Army knife my father had given me years ago that I had forgotten was in the side pocket, and a lighter I had used to light the campfire yesterday. Morning. Lily had her camera around her neck and the small bag of rocks she had collected. That was it. No food, no shelter, no warm clothing for the cool mountain nights, no map. Think, Amanda, think. What would Brian do? The thought came unbidden and bitter. Brian would never be in this situation because Brian would have been prepared for anything. Brian would have had a backup plan. I pushed thoughts of my brother aside and focused on immediate needs: water, shelter, and finding a way out of here. I remembered from our drive-in that we had crossed a river about 2 miles east of the campsite. Water would be our first goal, and perhaps the river would lead to civilization. I woke Lily gently, forcing a smile I did not feel. Ready for an adventure, explorer. Her eyes filled with confusion, then remembrance, then fear. They are not coming back today, are they? I could not lie to her anymore. No, sweetheart, I do not think they are. But we are going to be just fine. We are going to follow the river and find our way back to town. How far is town? She asked, her voice small but steady. I am not sure exactly, I admitted. But rivers often lead to towns or roads. Water brings people. We split the granola bar for breakfast, each taking tiny bites to make it last longer. I let Lily drink more of our water than I did, knowing we needed to find the river soon. As we walked east following the sun, as I had learned in Girl Scouts decades ago, I tried to remember anything I could about wilderness survival. Fish. If we could reach the river, maybe we could catch fish. But how? I had no fishing line, no hooks. By midday, we found the river, its clear water rushing over smooth stones. Lily's face lit up at the sight, and I felt a small surge of accomplishment. Step 1 completed. I spent an hour trying to fashion a fishing spear from a straight branch, sharpening the end with my knife, but my attempts at spearing fish were laughable. The swift current and my inexperience meant the fish easily darted away from my clumsy jabs. Look, Mom, berries, Lily called from a nearby bush. My heart jumped. Food. But then caution took over. Wait, Lily. Do not eat any. We need to be sure they are safe. I examined the small red berries carefully, trying to remember anything I could about wild edibles. Were these the safe kind or the poisonous kind? With no way to be certain, I reluctantly decided we could not risk it. That afternoon, we focused on building a better shelter near the river. I showed Lily how to gather fallen branches and arrange them against a fallen log to create a lean-to structure. We collected leaves and pine needles to create a softer floor and to help insulate us from the cold ground. How do we know which way is north again? Lily asked as we worked. I pointed to the sun. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Right now it is afternoon, so the sun is in the western part of the sky. That means that way is west, that way is east, north is there and south is there. She nodded, absorbing the information. So if we follow the river east, we might find people. That is the hope, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I spent hours that day trying different spots along the riverbank with my phone, hoping to find even a single bar of service. Nothing. We were truly on our own. That night, as we huddled in our shelter, I found myself thinking about a wilderness survival show I had watched years ago. The host had emphasized the rule of threes. You can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. We had shelter of sorts and water from the river, which I had showed Lily how to filter by pouring it through layers of sand and gravel in a section of bark. But food would become a serious issue soon. On the second night, Lily developed a fever. Her forehead burned under my hand, and she shivered despite the extra layer of my jacket draped over her. Terror, unlike anything I had ever known, gripped me. My child was sick in the wilderness with no medicine, no help, no way to call for rescue. I stayed awake all night, keeping watch and periodically wetting strips of my t-shirt in the cool river water to place on her forehead. I whispered stories and promises into the darkness, as much to comfort myself as her. Morning brought a heavy fog that shrouded the forest in an eerie white blanket. Lily's fever had broken, but she was weak and lethargic. We needed to keep moving to follow the river, but the fog disoriented me. Within hours, I realized with sinking dread that I had somehow lost sight of the river. The constant sound of rushing water had disappeared, replaced by the oppressive silence of the forest. We were lost. By the third day, hunger had become a constant companion, a gnawing emptiness that made it hard to think clearly. We had been drinking river water when we could find it, but had eaten nothing since that half granola bar each on the first morning. In the afternoon, we stumbled upon an old hunter's cabin, a small, weathered structure that seemed to promise salvation. My hopes soared only to crash when I found it locked and clearly abandoned for years. I considered breaking a window but decided against it. The cabin might be checked periodically by its owner, and damaging it might eliminate a potential source of help. Rain began to fall again, a steady cold downpour that soaked through our clothes within minutes. With no way to start a fire in the wet conditions and no dry clothes to change into, we huddled together beneath a rocky overhang, shivering uncontrollably. "Are we going to die here?" Lily asked, her voice so small I barely heard it over the rain. "No," I said firmly, pushing away the voice in my head that whispered, "Maybe. We are not going to die here. We are going to find our way out." As I held my daughter close, trying to share what little body heat I had, I remembered Brian's mocking words from past camping trips. "You would never make it a single night without your air mattress and fancy camping gadgets, city girl. Some of us actually know how to rough it." He had been right about one thing: I was completely unprepared for this. But he had underestimated something crucial. I was a mother fighting for her child's survival, and that made me more dangerous and determined than he could possibly imagine. By the fourth day, Lily's fever had returned with frightening intensity. Her cheeks flushed red against her otherwise pale face, and her eyes had a glassy, unfocused quality that terrified me. We had found the river again, thankfully, but had made little progress in any particular direction. Each step was becoming more difficult, as hunger weakened us both. "I am really hungry, Mom," Lily whispered, her voice hoarse. It was the understatement of the century. We had not eaten in over 3 days, and the gnawing emptiness had become a constant, painful companion. Desperation drove me to try setting simple traps for small animals using techniques I vaguely remembered from a documentary. I spent hours arranging sticks and rocks hoping to catch a squirrel or rabbit, but my inexperience was obvious. Nothing ventured near my pathetic attempts at traps. Late that afternoon, I noticed a rotting log near our makeshift camp. Remembering something else from that same documentary, I cautiously rolled it over with a stick. There, wriggling in the decaying wood, were several large grubs. My stomach turned at the thought, but survival overrode disgust. I carefully picked out the largest ones, and after a moment of hesitation put one in my mouth and bit down. The taste was indescribably awful, a combination of dirt and something vaguely nutty with a texture that made me want to gag. But I chewed and swallowed, then ate another and another. "Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and positive, "I found some food. It is not exactly pizza, but it has protein." Her eyes widened in horror when she saw what I was holding. "Those are bugs." "Yes, and in survival situations, bugs are food. Look, I ate some already and I am fine. They taste a little like nuts." The lie came easily when her survival was at stake. Memories flooded back of family dinners where my parents and Brian would call me squeamish and such a city girl when I objected to my father's hunting stories during meals. If only they could see me now eating live grubs without hesitation to keep my daughter alive. Lily eventually managed to eat 3 small grubs, gagging but keeping them down. It was nowhere near enough calories for a growing child, but it was something. I felt a small surge of triumph that quickly vanished as the sky darkened ominously. The storm that hit that night was violent, a thundering, raging beast that tore through the forest with malevolent force. Wind lashed at our shelter, eventually destroying it, completely forcing us to flee through the darkness to find new protection. Lightning split the sky in blinding flashes, followed by thunder so loud it seemed to shake the ground beneath our feet. We eventually took refuge under a rocky outcropping pressed against cold stone as rain pounded around us. Lily cried silently, her tears mixing with rainwater on her face. I held her close, murmuring reassurances. I did not believe myself. By morning, the storm had passed, but our situation had deteriorated further. The soles of my hiking boots had begun to separate after days of constant wet conditions, creating painful blisters on both feet. Each step became an exercise in endurance. Worse, I realized we had become completely disoriented during our nighttime flight from the storm. The river was nowhere in sight, and the dense forest looked the same in every direction. We spent hours walking only to discover our own footprints, confirming my worst fear: we were walking in circles. By the 6th day, exhaustion and hunger had begun to play tricks on my mind. Several times I thought I heard voices calling our names, only to find nothing but silent trees when I turned toward the sound. Lily had become too weak to walk far, requiring frequent rest breaks. Her once vibrant face was now gaunt, her eyes sunken and dull. When she stumbled and could not get up again, I gathered her in my arms and carried her, ignoring the screaming pain in my blistered feet and exhausted muscles. She felt so light, my once solid 10-year-old now reduced by hunger and dehydration. The thought that I might watch my child die in this forest because of my brother's cruelty fueled a rage that gave me strength I did not know I possessed. Later that day, I spotted a bush heavy with bright red berries. My hunger-clouded judgment nearly led me to pick them immediately, but something stopped me. A distant memory of a nature book Lily and I had read together. Those distinctive leaves, those bright red clusters, baneberry, highly toxic. We had nearly made a fatal mistake. The close call shook me deeply. How many other dangers lurked in this seemingly beautiful forest, waiting for our ignorance to become deadly? As if in answer to that question, we encountered a wild boar later that afternoon. The animal appeared suddenly from behind a thicket, its small eyes fixing on us with unmistakable aggression. I had always thought of pigs as somewhat comical animals, but there was nothing funny about the razor-sharp tusks and powerful bulk of the wild boar pawing at the ground before us. "Do not run," I whispered to Lily, slowly pushing her behind me. "Back away very slowly." The boar snorted and took a step toward us. Then another. Panic surged through me as I looked frantically for an escape. There to our right, a tree with low branches. If we could reach it. When I say now run to that tree and climb, I breathed. The boar charged. Now, I screamed, shoving Lily toward the tree and following close behind. The animal was incredibly fast, its bulk belying its speed. I felt a searing pain in my ankle as I scrambled up the trunk, the boar's tusk grazing me as I pulled my legs up just in time. We clung to the branches, trembling with fear and adrenaline as the boar circled below, occasionally ramming the trunk in frustration. Night fell with us still in the tree, afraid to come down. My ankle throbbed painfully where the tusk had cut me, a new worry to add to our growing list of problems. Lily eventually fell into an exhausted sleep, precariously balanced on a wide branch with my arm securing her. I remained awake, keeping watch and fighting despair. The wound on my ankle would likely become infected without proper cleaning and medication. Lily's condition was deteriorating by the hour. We had not found the river again, meaning our water supply was gone. Dehydration would kill us long before starvation. As my daughter slept, I finally allowed myself to cry, silent tears streaming down my dirt-streaked face. All those years of my family undermining my confidence, treating me like the incompetent one, the failure, the disappointment. Had they been right all along? Was I going to fail at the most important task of all, keeping my child alive? Brian's words from our last family dinner echoed in my mind. You would never survive without us, Amanda. You have always needed someone to bail you out. As I sat in that tree, ankle throbbing, stomach empty, daughter feverish beside me, I wondered if we were going to die in this forest, proving my brother right in the most tragic way possible. When morning light filtered through the leaves, I looked at Lily sleeping fitfully beside me, her face thin and pale after nearly a week without proper food. Something shifted inside me, a steely resolve hardening in my chest. I would not let them win. I would not let my brother be right about me. Most importantly, I would not let my daughter die in this forest. We are getting out of here, I whispered to myself. Today is when everything changes. After carefully checking that the boar was gone, we climbed down from the tree. My ankle protested painfully, but I ignored it. Pain was a luxury we could not afford right now. We need to find water first, I told Lily, trying to inject confidence into my voice. Let us look for signs of water. Remember how we learned that certain plants grow near water sources? We moved slowly through the forest, my eyes scanning constantly for anything useful. After about an hour, I spotted a formation of rocks with moisture seeping from between them. A small spring creating a tiny but clear pool of water. It was the first piece of luck we had encountered. I remembered something from a wilderness book about water filtration. Using charcoal from an old fire site we had passed, I created layers in a section of bark alternating sand, the charcoal and pieces of cloth torn from the bottom of my t-shirt. We poured the spring water through this makeshift filter, removing potential contaminants. Hydrated for the first time in nearly 24 hours, our spirits lifted slightly. Next challenge: food. I studied the spring and noticed small movements in the water where it formed a deeper pool downstream. Tiny fish no bigger than my finger darted in the clear water. An idea formed. I removed the small gold hoop earring I always wore, carefully bent it into a hook shape and attached it to a strand of thread pulled from my jacket hem. Fishing time, I told Lily with more enthusiasm than I felt. It took hours of frustrating attempts, but eventually I managed to hook one of the tiny fish, then another, and another. By mid-afternoon we had 6 small fish. Now we need fire, I said, pulling out my lighter with fingers crossed that it would still work after days of damp conditions. It took multiple attempts, and various combinations of dry materials I gathered from under rocks and fallen logs, but eventually a small flame caught. The surge of triumph I felt at that moment was indescribable. We had water, we had fire, we had food. I carefully cooked the small fish on heated rocks around our fire, showing Lily how to eat around the tiny bones. It was barely a few bites each, but it was the most delicious meal of my life. More importantly, I saw a spark return to Lily's eyes as the protein and fat entered her system. While the fire burned, I examined my ankle. The cut was red and inflamed, but not yet severely infected. I heated water and cleaned it as best I could, then used more charcoal to create a poultice, remembering a natural remedy my grandmother had once shown me. That night, for the first time since our abandonment, I created a truly effective shelter using techniques I had seen but never tried. Angled branches formed a frame with smaller branches woven between them, and a layer of large leaves, creating a waterproof covering. I even designed a simple system of bark channels to catch rainwater should it fall during the night. As Lily slept more peacefully than she had in days, I used a piece of charcoal to mark a large stone near our camp. I would not allow us to walk in circles again. From now on, we would mark our path clearly. The next morning brought another small victory. I discovered a patch of wild onions growing in a sunny, clearing, their distinctive smell unmistakable. Nearby, a bush heavy with small dark berries that I recognized from Lily's science book as safe and edible. We ate carefully, savoring each bite, using Lily's camera to document the plants so we could identify similar safe foods as we traveled. Lily's fever finally broke completely, her strength gradually returning with each small meal and good night's sleep in our improved shelter. I began teaching her survival skills, turning our desperate situation into adventure games to keep her spirits up. "See if you can find 3 different safe plants like I showed you," I challenged her, "or let us practice making a signal fire with green leaves to create smoke." On the 8th day, we climbed a tall hill that provided a better vantage point of our surroundings. From there, I spotted something in the distance that made my heart leap, a straight line cutting through the forest that had to be a road. Using charcoal on a piece of flat tree bark, I created a crude map of our location and the direction of the road. I estimated it was about 5 miles away, a challenging but not impossible distance in our weakened state. As we descended the hill, Lily suddenly froze, pointing to the ground. "Mom, look," she whispered. Fresh tracks in the soft earth, large paw prints with distinctive claw marks. Mountain lion. A month ago, I would have panicked, but something had changed in me. Instead of fear, I felt focused, analytical. I examined the tracks carefully, noting their direction. "Good catch, Lily. These are heading away from us, but we will make more noise as we walk and stay in open areas when possible." She looked up at me with something new in her eyes, respect and confidence. My 10-year-old daughter had complete faith that I would get us out of this situation alive, and for the first time I truly believed it too. That night I used the remaining daylight to fashion sturdy walking sticks for both of us, carefully smoothing the wood with my knife and hardening the tips in the fire. These would help with the difficult terrain and provide some protection if needed. As we settled into our shelter, Lily leaned against my shoulder. "We are going to make it, are not we, Mom?" I pulled her close, feeling a newfound certainty. "Yes, we are. And do you know why? Because we are not victims here. We are survivors." For the first time since reading my brother's note, I felt something beyond anger and fear. I felt powerful. Brian and my parents had meant to break me to prove my inadequacy. Instead, they had forced me to discover a strength I never knew I possessed. Tomorrow we would reach that road, and nothing was going to stop us. The 9th day dawned clear and cool as we set out toward the road I had spotted from the hilltop. Our progress was slow but steady, our bodies stronger after several days of fishberries and edible plants. I had fashioned a crude bandage for my ankle, using strips of cloth, and while it still throbbed with each step, the infection seemed to be receding, thanks to regular cleaning and charcoal poultices. "How much further?" Mom, Lily asked, using her walking stick to navigate a particularly rocky section of ground. "Maybe 2 more miles," I estimated, checking the position of the sun. "We should reach it by afternoon if we keep this pace." When we finally broke through the tree line and saw the narrow asphalt road stretching before us, I nearly wept with relief. Lily jumped up and down, her excitement palpable despite her exhaustion. But our celebration was short-lived as we realized a crucial fact: the road was rarely traveled. In the hour we sat resting on its edge, not a single vehicle passed. This was not the busy highway I had hoped for, but a seldom-used Forest Service road. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, the brief spark of excitement fading from her eyes. "We follow it," I said firmly. "All roads lead somewhere, and we leave signs that we were here." I showed her how to arrange large rocks to form letters, and together we created a massive SOS sign visible from the air in case any planes or helicopters flew overhead. That evening, Lily spotted a small aircraft passing high above us. We jumped and waved frantically, and she even tried using the flash on her camera as a signal. The plane continued on its occupants, unaware of the two desperate figures below. Rather than let discouragement set in, I kept us moving along the road one painful step at a time. By nightfall we had covered several miles, though we had yet to see a single vehicle or sign of civilization. Just a little further, I kept saying as much to myself as to Lily. Just a little further. On the morning of the 10th day, we rounded a bend in the road and spotted a structure in the distance. As we drew closer, I recognized it as an old gas station, its weathered sign barely legible. "People," Lily cried, finding a burst of energy to run ahead. But as we approached, my heart sank. The gas station was clearly abandoned, its windows dusty pumps, ancient and non-functional. A faded, closed sign hung crookedly on the door. Lily's face crumpled. "No one is here." "But it is shelter," I said, trying to sound optimistic, "and there might be something useful inside." After checking all doors and finding them locked, I made a difficult decision. Using a rock, I broke a small window at the back of the building and carefully cleared the glass so we could climb through. The interior was musty and thick with dust, but it was the first proper shelter we had seen in 10 days. Old shelves stood empty except for a few faded packages of beef jerky long past their expiration dates. I checked them carefully and determined they were still sealed and likely safe enough in our desperate situation. As Lily eagerly chewed the tough leathery jerky, I explored further and found an ancient landline phone on the counter. My hands trembled as I picked up the receiver, but as expected, there was no dial tone. The phone line had been disconnected years ago. Just as disappointment threatened to overwhelm me again, I spotted something on the wall behind the counter, a large local map with roads and distances marked clearly. According to the map, we were only 8 miles from a small town called Riverdale. "We can make it there tomorrow," I told Lily, studying the route. "We have shelter for tonight, food in our stomachs, and a clear path forward." We spent that night on the dusty floor of the gas station, the first roof over our heads in 10 days. Despite the hard surface, we both slept deeply, feeling safer than we had since our abandonment. At dawn, we set out with renewed determination. The beef jerky had given us energy, and the knowledge that civilization was within reach spurred us forward despite blistered feet and aching muscles. We had walked for about 2 hours when the most beautiful sound I had ever heard reached my ears, the rumble of an engine. A large logging truck was approaching from behind us, moving slowly up the incline. I stepped into the middle of the road, waving both arms frantically while Lily jumped up and down beside me. The truck slowed and then stopped its brakes, hissing. A bearded man in flannel leaned out the window, his eyes widening as he took in our appearance, filthy, gaunt clothes torn clearly in distress. "Good Lord, are you folks all right?" he asked, concern etched on his weathered face. "We were abandoned in the forest," I said, my voice breaking. 10 days ago. We need help." His name was Jacob, and the shock on his face as I briefly explained our situation quickly turned to anger and determination. He helped us into his truck, cranked the heat, when he saw us shivering, and handed us bottles of water and granola bars from his lunchbox. "The nearest hospital is in Riverdale, about 15 minutes from here," he said, already putting the truck in gear. "You both need medical attention right away." As we drove, I felt a strange numbness settling over me. After 10 days of constant vigilance and survival mode, the knowledge that we were finally safe allowed all the adrenaline to drain from my system. I held Lily's hand tightly as she dozed against my shoulder, both of us overwhelmed by the simple luxury of being warm, moving quickly toward help. The hospital in Riverdale was small but efficient. The emergency room staff mobilized quickly when Jacob explained our situation. Doctors examined us for dehydration, malnutrition, infections, and exposure. My ankle required cleaning and antibiotics. Lily needed IV fluids and monitoring for the lingering effects of her fever. While we were being treated, the hospital contacted the local police, who took my statement with increasing disbelief and anger. News travels fast in small towns, and by evening our story had reached the local media. A reporter from the nearest city arrived asking for an interview that I declined, focusing instead on Lily's recovery. It was from the police that I learned what had happened after our abandonment. According to their investigation, my family had returned to the campsite after 10 days expecting to find us still there, perhaps humbled, and having learned whatever twisted lesson my brother thought he was teaching. When they discovered we were gone, they had reported us missing, launching a search that had just begun when Jacob brought us to Riverdale. Your parents and brother are on their way here now, Officer Collins told me gently. They have been informed that you are safe, but also that they are facing serious charges. A storm of emotions raged through me at this news relief that the ordeal was truly over rage at their cruelty, bitterness, at their assumption that we would simply wait for rescue, and a strange, fierce pride that we had saved ourselves. 3 hours later they arrived. My parents entered the hospital room first, my mother's face streaked with tears, my father looking ashen and 20 years older. Brian and Rachel followed my brother, unable to meet my eyes, his usual confidence completely shattered. Amanda, my mother sobbed, moving toward me. Thank God you are safe. I held up a hand, stopping her approach. Do not come near us, I said, my voice steady and cold. Explain yourselves. Now. A flood of excuses and explanations poured out, each more unbelievable than the last. Brian claimed it was supposed to be just an overnight lesson in self-reliance, that they were going to return the very next day, but got delayed when my father had chest pains and needed to be checked at a hospital. We tried calling the ranger station to check on you, my father insisted, but no one answered. You knew the station was closed, I replied flatly. You told us that yourself before the trip. My mother claimed they had left more supplies than just one water bottle, that there must have been a mistake or animals had taken them. Rachel, to her credit, looked genuinely horrified, and admitted she had tried to stop the plan but had been overruled. It was just supposed to be a wake-up call, Brian finally said, his voice barely audible, to show you that your lifestyle choices were making you and Lily vulnerable. I never meant for you to be in real danger. The rage I had suppressed for days erupted. You left a 10-year-old child in the wilderness with no food, no shelter, no way to call for help. She nearly died, Brian. We both nearly died. What kind of monster does that to their own family? Officer Collins, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, your son and daughter-in-law are facing charges of child endangerment and criminal abandonment. We will need you all to come to the station to make formal statements. As they were led away, Brian looked back, once his face a mask of shame and regret. Amanda, I am so sorry. I never thought. That is right, I cut him off. You never thought I could survive without you. You were wrong. In the days that followed, our story made national headlines. Wilderness hero mom saves daughter after family abandonment. Read one. 10 days in hell, mother and daughter abandoned by family survive against all odds, proclaimed another. Brian's prestigious law firm placed him on immediate leave pending the criminal investigation. My parents faced public shame and potential charges for their role in the abandonment. Meanwhile, Lily and I became reluctant celebrities, though I declined all interview requests, focusing solely on our recovery. The one thing I made absolutely clear to everyone, from police to hospital staff to the social worker assigned to our case, I would never allow my family near Lily again. Whatever their intentions, whatever their excuses, they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had gambled with my child's life to prove a point, and I would never ever forgive that betrayal. The physical recovery came first. 3 days in the hospital treated the immediate effects of our ordeal: dehydration, malnutrition, my infected ankle, and the myriad cuts, bruises, and insect bites that covered our bodies. But the deeper healing, both physical and emotional, would take much longer. Once we were released from the hospital, a victims assistance program helped us secure temporary housing in Riverdale, while the legal proceedings against my family began. The district attorney ultimately charged Brian with child endangerment and criminal abandonment, serious felonies that could result in prison time. My parents faced lesser but still significant charges for their roles as accomplices. In a plea deal, that I reluctantly accepted for Lily's sake to spare her testifying in court, Brian received 5 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy. My parents received similar probation terms and community service. All three were ordered to pay significant restitution that would be placed in a trust for Lily's education. The legal consequences, however, were just the beginning of what they lost. Brian's law firm, unwilling to be associated with such a scandal, asked for his resignation. My parents' standing in their community was destroyed. The courts granted my petition for a permanent restraining order, legally keeping them away from Lily and me. But while they lost much, I discovered I had gained something invaluable, an unshakable confidence in my own resilience and capabilities. During our recovery, I began sketching. At first, it was just to process the trauma rough drawings of the forest, the shelters we had built, the tools we had fashioned from nothing. But as the weeks passed, those sketches evolved into a powerful series of artworks, exploring themes of survival, abandonment, and rebirth. A local gallery owner saw my work and offered me a small exhibition. To my surprise, the show sold out completely, with several pieces acquired by a prominent collector who commissioned more. For the first time in my adult life, my art was not just personally fulfilling but financially viable. The money from the art sales and the restitution fund allowed us to move away from Portland, away from the shadows of my family's influence. We found a small house near the coast where the sound of waves replaced the whispers of trees in our nightmares. Lily, remarkably resilient as children often are, seemed to process the trauma through action. She joined a wilderness education program for young people eager to learn proper survival skills and outdoor techniques. The shy, uncertain girl who had entered that forest was gone, replaced by a confident, capable young person who now taught other children how to identify edible plants and build emergency shelters. "Remember when we thought those red berries might be safe to eat?" she asked me one afternoon as we hiked along coastal trails, now well equipped with proper gear and emergency supplies. And they turned out to be baneberry. I am going to teach my wilderness group about that tomorrow. My heart swelled with pride at her transformation. The experience that could have broken her had instead revealed her strength, just as it had mine. 6 months after our ordeal, I received a letter from Brian. I almost burned it unopened, but finally decided to read it, needing to understand how my own brother could have done something so unthinkably cruel. His words, penned from the therapy sessions the court had mandated, revealed a lifetime of jealousy I had never fully recognized. He admitted to resenting the special bond Lily and I shared, so different from his more formal, achievement-oriented relationship with his own children. He confessed to feeling threatened by my unconventional choices and the freedom with which I lived my life despite having less material success than him. "I wanted to prove you needed us," he wrote. "I never imagined you would not only survive but thrive. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for what cannot be forgiven." I did not respond to his letter. Some betrayals go too deep for forgiveness, at least in the near term. But I did not hate him or my parents anymore. Hatred required energy. I preferred to invest in rebuilding our lives. My parents attempted their own reconciliation through family therapy sessions, which I attended separately from them. The therapist helped me understand that they had been manipulated by Brian's authority and confidence, falling into the same pattern of deferring to him that had characterized our family dynamics for decades. It did not excuse their actions, but it helped me contextualize them. On the 1-year anniversary of our abandonment, Lily and I did something that shocked everyone who knew our story. We went camping. Not in Blackwater Forest and not alone, but with a guided group in a national park. It was time to confront our fears and reclaim the wilderness on our terms. That first night, sitting by a properly built campfire with appropriate safety measures in place, Lily looked up at the star-filled sky and said something I will never forget. "I am not afraid anymore, Mom, and I am actually glad we know how strong we are now." In that moment, I realized the profound truth that had emerged from our nightmare: sometimes being left to die is what teaches you how to truly live. The experience had stripped away everything artificial in my life, every false limitation, every assumed inadequacy. In the most primal test imaginable, when my child's life depended on my abilities, I had discovered resources within myself I never knew existed. In the 2 years since our ordeal, I have written a book about our experience that became a bestseller. Lily and I started a foundation that offers wilderness training specifically for women and children, teaching not just survival skills but the mindset of resilience. I have given talks at schools and community centers about finding strength in adversity. My brother and parents have respected the legal boundaries while continuing their own therapy journeys. Tyler and Megan, now teenagers, occasionally exchange supervised emails, with Lily maintaining a cautious cousin relationship that may someday heal. During a recent school presentation about courage, Lily stunned her classmates and teacher by matter-of-factly explaining how she had survived 10 days in the wilderness after being abandoned by family members. "My mom taught me that we are all stronger than we think," she told her wide-eyed audience. "Sometimes you do not know what you can do until doing it is the only choice you have." As I watched my daughter share our story with confidence, rather than trauma, I realized that while the forest had nearly taken our lives, it had also given us an unexpected gift: the unshakable knowledge of our own capabilities. Today, as I teach other mothers and daughters how to build a fire together, I see the same transformation in their eyes that I experienced in that forest. The realization that they are not defined by others' expectations or limitations, that they contain within themselves everything needed to survive and thrive. What do you think about the actions my family took? Have you ever discovered strength in yourself during a difficult situation that surprised you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own inner strength. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the wilderness inside you is more powerful than any forest you might face.